The stellar assembly chamber had seen walkouts before, but never from a species like this. When Ambassador Chen Wei rose from her seat, removed the crystal bearing humanity's crest, and placed it on the table, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The breaking point. The Galactic Assembly's main chamber stretched upward like a cathedral made of starlight and crystal. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the human delegation's podium, a small platform relegated to the outer ring where the lesser species were permitted to observe but rarely speak. For 50 years, this had been humanity's place in the galaxy, tolerated guests at a table set by their betters. Chen Wei adjusted his simple gray uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial robes worn by the Zarathi delegates across the chamber. The insectoid species moved with practiced arrogance, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights in 1,000 facets. They had ruled this section of the galaxy for 3 millennia, and they never let anyone forget it. The human delegation consisted of just 3 people. Chen Wei represented Earth and its colonies. Beside him stood Dr. Sarah Martinez, a xenobiologist who had spent decades trying to build bridges between species, and Lieutenant Colonel James Park, their military attaché who had seen too many human colonies stripped of resources by protection agreements with superior civilizations. Today's session would be different. Chen Wei could feel it in the way the Zarathi delegates clicked their mandibles in anticipation. They had something planned, another degradation disguised as galactic law. The massive holographic display at the chamber's center flickered to life, showing Supreme Coordinator Zak Theta of the Zarathi Empire. The creature's 6 arms moved in elaborate patterns as it spoke through its translator node. The Assembly recognizes the growing security threats in the outer territories. Zak Theta began, its synthetic voice echoing through the chamber. Pirates and rogues nations threaten the stability we have maintained for generations. Therefore, the Zarathi Empire proposes a new protection tax on all junior members of the Assembly. Chen Wei's jaw tightened. Junior members meant humans and 12 other species who had achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. The holographic display shifted to show the proposed tax rates. Chen Wei heard Dr. Martinez gasp beside him. The numbers were astronomical: 60% of all mineral extraction, 40% of agricultural output, and mandatory conscription of 1/10 of each species' population for security forces. The Corvani ambassador, a tall crystalline being from the inner systems, raised a glowing appendage to speak. These rates would cripple our developing economies. How can we grow if we surrender more than half our resources? Zak Theta's compound eyes turned toward the Corvani with what Chen Wei had learned to recognize as amusement. Growth is a privilege earned through contribution to galactic stability. Those who cannot contribute adequately perhaps should reconsider their readiness for interstellar civilization. The threat was clear: pay or be forcibly returned to your home system, cut off from galactic trade and technology. It had happened before to species who resisted too strongly. The melody had been confined to their home world 20 years ago. They were still there, their cities crumbling, their population declining without access to galactic medical supplies. Chen Wei remembered his grandfather's stories about Earth's first contact with the Galactic Assembly. Humanity had been so hopeful, so eager to join a community of advanced civilizations. They had shared their art, their music, their diverse cultures. In return, they had received technology, but always with strings attached, always with payments due, always with reminders that humans were newcomers who should be grateful for whatever scraps they received. For 50 years, humanity had paid. They had surrendered mineral rights to entire asteroids. They had allowed alien corporations to harvest Earth's oceans. They had sent their brightest minds to serve in alien laboratories where human creativity was exploited but never credited. They had watched their colonies struggle while alien observers ensured they never grew too quickly or became too independent. Lieutenant Colonel Park leaned close to Chen Wei. The military won't accept conscription. We've already lost too many people to their peacekeeping operations. Chen Wei nodded slowly. He thought of the message he had received from President Harrison before leaving Earth. If they push too far, you have full authority to act. The words had seemed dramatic at the time. Now they felt prophetic. The debate continued for hours. The senior species, the Zarathi, the Vorthak Confederacy, the Etherian Collective, all spoke in favor of the protection tax. They cited security concerns, the cost of maintaining order, the responsibility of established civilizations to guide newer ones. Every word dripped with condescension. The junior species protested, but weakly. They knew their voices carried no weight. The assembly operated on a weighted voting system. The Zarathi Empire alone controlled 30% of the votes. With their allies, they could pass any measure they wished. The junior species combined held less than 15%. Finally, Supreme Coordinator Zach Theta called for the vote. All in favor of Protection Tax Resolution 7749? One by one, the senior species voted yes. The display showed the tally climbing past the 60% needed for passage. The measure would become law. Within a month, human colonies would be stripped of resources they desperately needed to survive. Earth itself would see its children taken to serve alien masters. The measure passes, Zach Theta announced with satisfaction. Implementation begins in 30 standard cycles. Junior members are expected to comply fully. Resistance will be met with appropriate correction. Chen Wei stood up. The movement was so sudden that security drones immediately focused on him. The human ambassador reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device. Every species in the chamber recognized it. A diplomatic recall beacon, the symbol of a civilization's membership in the Galactic Assembly. Ambassador Chen? The Etherian representative's melodious voice carried concern. What are you doing? Chen Wei looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegation. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. For 50 years, humanity has sought acceptance in this assembly. We have contributed our resources, our knowledge, and our people. In return, we have received oppression disguised as guidance, exploitation disguised as partnership, and now slavery disguised as security. He placed the recall beacon on the podium with a click that echoed through the silent chamber. The United Earth Coalition formally withdraws from the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately. We no longer recognize your authority over human space or human citizens. The chamber erupted. The Vorthak delegate's mechanical voice boomed warnings about the consequences of withdrawal. The Etherians sang their dismay in harmonious choruses, but it was Zach Theta's reaction that would be remembered in history. The Supreme Coordinator's 6 arms stopped moving entirely, a sign of complete shock in Zarathi body language. You cannot simply leave, Zach Theta finally managed. There are procedures, obligations, debts to be settled. Chen Wei turned toward the exit, Dr. Martinez and Lieutenant Colonel Park flanking him. Those are your procedures, your obligations. Humanity owes you nothing. As they walked toward the chamber's doors, Chen Wei heard the Corvani ambassador whisper to another junior species representative. They actually did it. They actually walked away. The massive doors sealed behind the human delegation with a resonance that seemed to shake the entire station. In the chamber, chaos reigned as the senior species tried to understand what had just happened. They had ruled for so long, they had forgotten that power only exists when others agree to be ruled. Outside, Chen Wei activated his communicator. Eagle's Nest, this is Ambassador Chen. The package has been delivered. Humanity stands alone. President Harrison's voice came through immediately. Understood, Ambassador. Come home. We have work to do. As their shuttle departed from Station Zenith, Chen Wei looked back at the massive structure that had symbolized galactic civilization for millennia. Somewhere in that crystal cathedral, alien leaders were scrambling to understand what humanity's withdrawal meant. They would find out soon enough. The galaxy had just changed forever, and humanity had changed it with 3 simple words. We choose freedom. The Silent Revolution. 3 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Assembly, and the galaxy was beginning to feel the consequences. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the cargo vessel Northern Star, watching the mysterious coordinates appear on her encrypted display. Like hundreds of other human captains, she had received orders that existed in no official database. The Northern Star's manifest claimed she was carrying agricultural equipment to the Mars colonies. The Zarathi patrol ships that scanned her from a distance found exactly what they expected: farming drones, soil processors, and water recycling systems. They didn't detect the hidden compartments built into the ship's superstructure, containing something far more valuable than any machine. Captain, we're approaching the designated coordinates, her navigator, David Kim, announced. Still nothing on standard sensors, Rodriguez smiled. Switch to quantum resonance scanning, narrow beam, frequency 77 alpha. The main display shifted, and suddenly space that had appeared empty revealed something extraordinary. A massive construction platform hidden behind advanced cloaking technology, surrounded by dozens of human vessels. Beyond it, a planet that appeared on no galactic chart gleamed with the blue and green of a habitable world. Welcome to Haven Colony, came a transmission from the platform. You're carrying Archive Unit 47, correct? Confirmed, Rodriguez replied. Ready to transfer. The archives were humanity's greatest secret. Every piece of human knowledge, every scientific breakthrough, every artistic creation, every innovation that humans had developed or improved upon during their time in the Galactic Assembly. The aliens had always taken human contributions for granted, never realizing how much they had come to depend on human creativity and problem-solving. While Rodriguez supervised the transfer, halfway across the galaxy, the Corvani were discovering the first consequences of humanity's withdrawal. Administrator Velthorn stared at the empty hydroponic chambers that should have been producing food for 12 billion Corvani citizens. The crystalline being's form flickered with distress colors as it reviewed the reports. Production is down 70%, its assistant reported. The hybrid seeds the humans developed no longer germinate properly. Our scientists cannot determine why. Velthorn knew why, though it would never admit it publicly. The seeds had been engineered by human botanists to require specific enzymatic triggers that human specialists had been quietly providing during routine maintenance visits. Without those humans, the Corvani's entire agricultural system was failing. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Vorthak Confederacy discovered that their prized manufacturing systems, upgraded by human engineers over decades, were developing mysterious errors. The Etherians found their complex harmony-based computers falling out of sync without the human technicians who had learned to tune them. Even the mighty Zarathi Empire was not immune. Their biological ships, which had incorporated human-suggested improvements to their neural networks, were beginning to show signs of degradation. On Earth, President Marcus Jackson stood before the United Nations, now reorganized as the United Earth Command. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every human colony and settlement. Behind him, holographic displays showed the true scope of humanity's secret exodus. "My fellow humans," Jackson began, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "Operation Silent Seed is ahead of schedule. We have established 47 hidden colonies in uncharted space. Our population dispersal is at 60%. Even if the Galactic Assembly discovers and destroys Earth tomorrow, humanity will survive and thrive." The displays shifted to show industrial statistics that would have shocked the alien leaders. In 3 months, humanity had built more ships than they had been allowed to construct in 50 years under assembly restrictions. Free from alien oversight, human innovation had exploded. New drive systems that the Assembly had deemed too dangerous for junior species were being installed in every vessel. Weapons that humans had been forbidden to develop were rolling off production lines. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who had returned from the fateful Assembly meeting, now headed the Xenological Assessment Division. She presented her analysis to the command. The Assembly races have become dependent on human contributions in ways they never acknowledged. Their food systems, manufacturing, computing, even their medical technology, all have incorporated human innovations that they cannot maintain without us. She brought up a chart showing projected collapse timeframes. The Corvani will face critical food shortages within 6 months. The Vorthak manufacturing base will fail within a year. Even the Zarathi, for all their power, will see significant degradation in their biological systems within 18 months. Lieutenant Colonel Park, promoted to general after the withdrawal, added his military assessment. "Our stealth reconnaissance ships have mapped every major assembly military installation. We know their patrol routes, their supply lines, their weaknesses. We're not planning to attack, but if they come for us, we'll be ready." The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity would not fire a single shot in anger. They would simply disappear from the galactic stage, taking with them every contribution they had ever made. The assembly races would slowly discover that the primitive humans they had exploited were actually the threads holding their civilization together. Captain Rodriguez, having completed her delivery to Haven Colony, received new orders. She was to proceed to the edge of Zarathi space and deploy a series of surveillance satellites. These devices, no larger than a human fist, were virtually undetectable by assembly technology. They would provide real-time intelligence on alien activities while remaining completely invisible. As the Northern Star moved through space, Rodriguez monitored intercepted communications from assembly worlds. The panic was beginning to spread. The junior species were emboldened by humanity's example. The Melody, confined to their home world for 20 years, had stopped responding to assembly demands. The Corvani were quietly withdrawing their representatives from Station Zenith, but it was a transmission from an unexpected source that truly surprised her. The message was from Subcommander Creel of the Zarathi Empire, sent on a frequency that only humans would monitor. The transmission was simple. "Request private dialogue. Zarathi recognition of human sovereignty possible. Terms negotiable." Rodriguez forwarded the message to Earth Command immediately. The aliens were beginning to understand that they had gravely miscalculated. They had seen humanity's kindness as weakness, their cooperation as submission, their creativity as a resource to be exploited. Now they were learning that humans had been choosing to help, choosing to cooperate, choosing to share, and choices, by definition, could be revoked. On Haven Colony, the first generation of truly free human children were being born. They would grow up on a world where humans made their own laws, chose their own destiny, and never had to bow to alien masters. The colony's advanced defenses, incorporating every military innovation humans had been forbidden to develop, stood ready to protect them. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had claimed their piece of it not through conquest but through courage. They had done what no junior species had ever dared to do before. They had simply walked away from the table and built their own. As President Jackson said in his closing remarks to the United Earth Command, "We offered them our hand in friendship, and they chose to chain it. Now we offer them nothing but our absence, and they're discovering that our absence might be the most powerful presence we ever had." The New Dawn. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and Station Zenith looked like a monument to fallen pride. Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the same shuttle bay he had departed from in defiance, but everything had changed. This time, he hadn't come alone. Behind him stood representatives from 17 different species, all members of the newly formed Terran Alliance. The Galactic Assembly Hall that had once gleamed with power now felt hollow. Only 5 of the original senior species remained. Empty seats surrounded the curved table like missing teeth in a dying smile. Supreme Coordinator Zach Theta of the Zarathi Empire sat hunched in its chair, 4 of its 6 arms hanging limp from exhaustion. Ambassador Chen, Zach Theta's translator, struggled with what sounded like emotion. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." Chen Wei took his place at a new podium, one positioned at the table's center rather than its periphery. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. "The Terran Alliance comes not to rejoin your assembly, but to discuss the terms of its dissolution." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Etherian representative's harmonious voice cracked with discord. "Dissolution. The assembly has stood for 4,000 years. And it has failed for the last 2,000, Chen Wei replied calmly. "You created a system where might determined right, where older meant better, where different meant inferior. That system is dying, and we're here to help build something new." Dr. Sarah Martinez, now serving as the Alliance's chief diplomatic officer, activated a holographic display. It showed the true state of the galaxy. Red zones marked failing colonies and broken supply chains. Yellow indicated systems in crisis. Green showed regions that had joined or were negotiating with the Terran Alliance. The green zones outnumbered all others combined. "The Corvani Federation has joined us as full partners," Martinez announced. "Their food crisis ended within weeks of accepting our terms. The Melody Republic, freed from their planetary imprisonment, now contributes their artistic excellence to our cultural exchange programs. Even elements within your own empires have reached out to us." General Park, wearing the insignia of the Alliance Defense Force, presented the military reality. 17 Zarathi colony worlds have declared independence and requested Alliance protection. The Vorthak Confederacy has lost control of 6 major systems. The Etherian collective is fragmenting as individual harmonies seek their own paths. The truth was undeniable. Without human innovation and problem-solving, the rigid hierarchies of the old powers had become brittle. Their subject species, seeing humanity's successful defiance, had found their own courage. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around a new principle: voluntary cooperation among equals. "What do you want?" The Vorthak representative's mechanical voice carried something that might have been desperation. "What will it take for humans to share their knowledge again?" Chen Wei stood, his presence commanding attention in a way it never had during humanity's years of subjugation. "The Terran Alliance offers partnership to any species willing to accept 3 fundamental principles. First, absolute equality among all sentient beings. No species is inherently superior to another. Second, knowledge and resources are shared freely among all members, with no restrictions based on age of civilization or technological level. Third, conflicts are resolved through consensus, not force or economic coercion." He paused, looking directly at Zach Theta. "These are not negotiable." The Zarathi Supreme Coordinator's compound eyes reflected 1,000 different angles of defeat. "And if we refuse? Then you continue alone," Chen Wei replied simply. "Your biological ships will continue degrading. Your colonies will continue declaring independence. Your empire will continue its slow collapse into irrelevance. We won't attack you. We won't blockade you. We'll simply continue building our future without you." Captain Rodriguez watched the proceedings from the observation deck. Her ship, the Northern Star, was now flagship of the Third Fleet, one of 12 Alliance fleets that patrolled the growing network of free worlds. Beside her stood Captain Velzar, a young Corvani who had graduated from the first integrated Alliance military academy. "It's hard to believe," Velazar said, its crystalline form pulsing with thoughtful colors. "2 years ago, my people were starving because we depended on seeds we couldn't replicate. Now we're teaching other species our mineral cultivation techniques while learning human agricultural methods." Rodriguez smiled. "That's the difference between the old way and our way. They hoarded knowledge to maintain power. We share it to build strength. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, so we make sure there are no weak links." In the chamber below, the debate had continued for hours. The old powers struggled with concepts that seemed alien to their hierarchical thinking. How could younger species be equals? How could knowledge be shared without losing advantage? How could order be maintained without dominance? It was the Etherian representative who broke first. The harmonious being's voice rose in a complex melody that their translator struggled to convert. "The Etherian Collective, portions of it, request individual membership in the Terran Alliance. We understand this means abandoning our collective superiority complex. I accept your terms." The admission sent shockwaves through the remaining assembly members. The Etherians had been among the most rigid supporters of the old hierarchy. Their defection meant the complete collapse of the existing order. One by one, other voices joined in. The Vorthak Confederacy split, with individual mechanical consciousnesses choosing their own paths. Some joined the alliance, others remained isolated, clinging to past glory. Even among the Zarathi, cracks appeared. Junior members of their species, who had never been allowed voices in their own empire, began speaking up. Chen Wei produced a document, not a digital display, but actual paper in the human tradition. "This is the Charter of the Terran Alliance. It guarantees the rights and responsibilities of all member species. It cannot be changed without unanimous consent of all members. It enshrines the principles of equality, shared knowledge, and peaceful cooperation." He placed it on the ancient assembly table. "Any who wish to sign may do so. Any who don't are free to go their own way. But know this, the age of empire is over. The age of alliance has begun." The signing took 3 days. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves standing together as equals. Former servant races signed alongside their former masters. Humanity, which had entered the galactic stage as beggars, now stood as the architects of a new order. But it was the final signature that marked the true end of the old galaxy. Supreme Coordinator Zach Theta, abandoned by most of its empire, approached the charter with 2 of its 6 arms trembling. The once mighty leader of the Zarathi Empire signed not as a conqueror or ruler, but as a simple citizen of a single world seeking membership in something greater. President Jackson's address to the combined species was broadcast across the galaxy. 2 years ago, humanity walked away from a table where we were not welcome as equals. Today, we stand together at a new table, one where every voice matters, where every species contributes, where every being has worth. This is not humanity's victory, it is freedom's victory. The transformation was not immediate or without challenges. Some species struggled to abandon millennia of ingrained superiority. Others found it difficult to trust after generations of exploitation. But gradually, system by system, world by world, the new order took hold. Haven Colony, once humanity's secret refuge, became the Alliance's capital. Its hidden location was revealed, showing a thriving world where human children played alongside young Corvani, where melody artists collaborated with human musicians, where former enemies worked together to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for generations. Chen Wei stood in his new office overlooking Haven's capital city. Dr. Martinez joined him, carrying reports from 100 different worlds. "The transition is proceeding better than our most optimistic projections," she said. "Technology sharing has led to breakthrough after breakthrough. The Corvani's crystal-based computing combined with human quantum processing has opened entirely new fields of science." General Park added his own assessment. "The Alliance Defense Force is now the strongest military in the galaxy, not because we conquered anyone, but because everyone contributed their best technologies and tactics. The Zarathi's biological ships guided by human navigation systems are incredible." Chen Wei nodded, but his eyes remained on the city below. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about Earth's ancient United Nations, how it struggled because nations joined but never truly united. We've learned from those mistakes. The Terran Alliance isn't just an alliance of convenience, it's a commitment to a shared future. As the sun set over Haven Colony, casting golden light across buildings that incorporated architectural styles from dozens of species, the galaxy's transformation was complete. The assembly hall on Station Zenith was being converted into a museum, a reminder of what happens when power becomes more important than progress, when age becomes more valued than innovation, when fear replaces respect. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more powerful. They had liberated it. By walking away from oppression, they had shown others that oppression only exists when people accept it. By refusing to be lesser, they had proven that no one is greater. The last entry in the official records of the Galactic Assembly read simply, "Dissolved by unanimous consent, replaced by hope." And in classrooms across the Alliance, young beings of every species learned the lesson that changed the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from fighting at the table, but from having the courage to walk away and build your own. The stars belong to everyone now. The price of freedom. 5 years had passed since the dissolution of the Galactic Assembly, and the Terran Alliance faced its first true test. Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the Strategic Command Center on Haven Colony, surrounded by representatives from 37 member species. The holographic displays showed something that made even the seasoned diplomat's blood run cold. A massive fleet of ships, unlike anything in the Alliance database, was emerging from the void beyond chartered space. They moved in perfect synchronization, their hull design suggesting a level of technology that surpassed even the old Assembly's most advanced civilizations. The scouts who had first detected them had transmitted only one message before going silent. "The architects have returned." President Sarah Martinez, who had succeeded Jackson after his retirement, addressed the emergency session. 3 hours ago, we received a transmission from these vessels. They claim to be the original builders of Station Zenith and the creators of the technology that made faster-than-light travel possible for all our species. The room erupted in discussion. Every spacefaring civilization had legends about the architects, the mysterious beings who had seeded the galaxy with jump gates and then vanished without explanation 4,000 years ago. Most had assumed they were extinct or had ascended to some higher form of existence. General Park, his hair now silver but his mind still sharp, brought up the tactical analysis. Their fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels, each one is the size of a small moon. Our entire combined Alliance fleet wouldn't make a dent in their shields, assuming they even have shields we can understand. Captain Maya Rodriguez, now Admiral of the First Fleet, added her intelligence report. They've been monitoring our communications for who knows how long. They know about humanity's withdrawal from the Assembly, about the formation of the Alliance, about everything we've built. Chen Wei studied the alien transmission again. The beings calling themselves architects looked nothing like any species in the known galaxy. They appeared to be pure energy contained within crystalline shells that constantly shifted between dimensions. Their message had been simple but chilling. The experiment has concluded. Evaluation in progress. Prepare for judgment. Dr. David Kim, who had risen from navigator to become the Alliance's chief scientist, presented his analysis. Based on the energy signatures from their ships, they exist partially outside our dimensional space. Our weapons, our shields, even our sensors can barely interact with them. If they decide we've failed whatever tests they've been conducting, we have no conventional defense. The weight of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. For 5 years, the Alliance had celebrated its freedom and growth. Now they faced a threat that made the old Assembly's oppression look like a minor inconvenience. It was Velthorn, the Corvani representative who had witnessed their species near starvation, who spoke the thought everyone was avoiding. Perhaps we should contact the remnants of the old powers. The Zarathi Empire still maintains some independent worlds. If we face extinction, shouldn't we stand together? Chen Wei considered this carefully. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had oppressed humanity might now be needed as allies against an even greater threat. But before he could respond, another transmission arrived from the Architect fleet. The being that appeared on the display was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Its crystalline form contained swirling galaxies of light, and when it spoke, the words seemed to bypass sound entirely and appear directly in everyone's consciousness. "I am designation Overseer," it announced. 4,000 years ago, we seeded this galaxy with technology and observed how different species would develop and interact. You were our experiment in consciousness, cooperation, and conflict. The display shifted to show the entire history of the galaxy from the architect's perspective. Every war, every alliance, every betrayal and triumph had been watched and recorded. The rise of the Galactic Assembly, humanity's arrival on the galactic stage, and recent revolutionary changes were all part of their vast study. Most experimental galaxies follow predictable patterns, the overseer continued. The strong dominate the weak, hierarchies solidify, innovation stagnates, entropy accelerates. In 93% of cases, galactic civilization collapses within 5,000 years of our departure. President Martinez found her voice. And our galaxy? The overseer's form pulsed with what might have been interest. Your galaxy produced an anomaly. A species that chose cooperation over domination when given power. That transformed oppression into opportunity. That walked away from a corrupt system rather than trying to dominate it. Humanity's actions created a cascade effect we have not observed elsewhere. Chen Wei stepped forward. You're talking about humanity's withdrawal from the assembly. Correct. In every other experimental galaxy, oppressed species either accepted their fate or attempted violent revolution. Both paths led to eventual stagnation or destruction. Humanity chose a third path, creative destruction through withdrawal. You didn't destroy the old system with weapons. You let it collapse under its own weight while building something better. The implications were staggering. Humanity's decision to walk away hadn't just changed their galaxy. It had apparently done something unprecedented in the architect's vast experiment. Admiral Rodriguez posed the crucial question. So what happens now? Do we pass your test? The overseer's form shifted, and suddenly the command center was filled with architects, their forms appearing throughout Alliance space simultaneously. They weren't just in the command center, they were on every Alliance world, every ship, every station, appearing to billions of beings at once. The experiment is concluded, the overseer announced. But your story is just beginning. We offer you a choice, as humanity once offered choice to others. Join the architects as observers of other galaxies, sharing your unique approach to civilization with countless experimental regions. Or remain here, independent, knowing that you have achieved something remarkable. The offer hung in the air like a suspended breath. To join beings of almost godlike power, to see the universe on a scale unimaginable to mortal species, it was tempting beyond measure. But Chen Wei, speaking not just for humanity, but for the Alliance, gave the answer that defined them. We choose to remain. Our work here isn't finished. There are still species suffering under old systems, still worlds that haven't heard of the Alliance's principles, still problems to solve and dreams to build. We won't abandon what we've created to become observers. We are participants. The overseer's form pulsed brighter. We calculated a 97% probability you would choose ascension. Once again, humanity and its allies surprise us. General Park added, You said we're an anomaly. Maybe that's because we don't make decisions based on calculations or probabilities. We make them based on hope, responsibility, and stubborn determination to do what's right rather than what's easy. The architects conferred among themselves in ways that transcended normal communication. Finally, the overseer spoke again. Very well, the Terran Alliance has passed the final test, the test of choosing purpose over power. As a graduation gift, we leave you with this. The space around every Alliance world shimmered, massive structures materialized, not weapons or shields, but something far more valuable. They were gateway builders, devices that could create permanent jump gates to any point in the universe. Use these wisely, the overseer said. You now have the power to connect not just your galaxy but all galaxies. The experimental phase is over. The real work begins now. Dr. Kim's instruments went wild as he analyzed the new technology. This is incredible. We could reach galaxies billions of light years away. We could prevent other civilizations from falling into the same traps that almost destroyed ours. But Chen Wei raised a cautioning hand. And we could also become the oppressors we once fled from. This power comes with enormous responsibility. The overseer's form began to fade. Indeed, that understanding is why you were given this gift. The architects will no longer observe or interfere. The future of this galaxy and any you choose to connect with is entirely in your hands. As the architect fleet dissolved into pure energy and disappeared into dimensions beyond understanding, the Alliance members stood in stunned silence. They had been given power beyond imagination, but more importantly, they had been trusted with it. President Martinez addressed not just those present, but the entire Alliance through quantum communication. 5 years ago, humanity walked away from a table where we weren't welcome. Today we've been handed the keys to the universe itself, not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we chose freedom over power, cooperation over domination, hope over fear. In the weeks that followed, the Alliance carefully studied their new capabilities. The Gateway builders could indeed connect to other galaxies, where they found civilizations in various stages of development. Some were utopias that had solved problems the Alliance still struggled with. Others were trapped in cycles of war and oppression that looked heartbreakingly familiar. Captain Velzar, the young Corvani who had once watched his people starve, proposed what became known as the Freedom Protocol. We don't impose our ways on other galaxies. We simply make contact, share our story, and offer them the same choice humanity once made, to walk away from oppression and build something better. The first intergalactic gateway was opened 1 year later, connecting to a galaxy where 12 species were locked in a war that had lasted 10,000 years. The Alliance didn't send warships or demands. They sent teachers, doctors, engineers, and most importantly, storytellers who shared the tale of how a small, primitive species had changed their galaxy by refusing to accept the status quo. Chen Wei, now in his 70s but still serving as chief ambassador, stood at the gateway ceremony. Beside him were representatives from every Alliance species, including surprising additions. Supreme Coordinator Zach Theta, no longer supreme or coordinating anything, stood as a simple citizen who had learned that true strength came from admitting weakness. Former Vorthak overlords worked alongside species they had once enslaved. Even the Etherians, who had abandoned their collective consciousness for individual freedom, were present. "We don't know what we'll find out there," Chen Wei said in his address. "We don't know if other galaxies will accept our message or reject it. But we know this: every being deserves the chance to choose their own destiny. Every species deserves the opportunity to be more than what others decide they should be." As the gateway stabilized and the first Alliance exploration ship prepared to journey to another galaxy, Admiral Rodriguez reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "You know what the real irony is?" she said to Chen Wei. "The architects spent 4,000 years looking for something special in our galaxy. They found it in the species that everyone else thought was worthless." Chen Wei smiled. "Maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary places. Sometimes the youngest voice has the oldest wisdom. Sometimes walking away is the bravest way forward." The exploration ship entered the gateway, carrying with it not weapons or demands, but something far more powerful: the proof that change was possible, that freedom was achievable, and that even the smallest voice could reshape the universe if it had the courage to say no more. Back on Haven Colony, in schools where young beings of dozens of species learned together, a new lesson was added to the curriculum. It was simple but profound. The architects gave us the power to reach across the universe, but humanity taught us the power to reach across the table and see each other as equals. Both powers are important, but only one is essential. The galaxy had been transformed by humanity's courage to walk away. Now the universe itself would learn that same lesson. The experiment was over, but the real adventure of conscious beings choosing cooperation over conquest, freedom over oppression, and hope over fear had just begun. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, the architects watched from dimensions beyond understanding, no longer as experimenters but as witnesses to something they had searched for across millions of galaxies: proof that consciousness could evolve beyond the cycle of domination and submission, that beings could choose to lift each other up rather than hold each other down. The price of freedom had been paid not in blood or conquest, but in the courage to say no to oppression and yes to possibility. And that price, once paid, had purchased something priceless: a future where every being, no matter how small or young or different, had the right to reach for the stars.